Hi everybody, this is Bogus Reviews, and today I'm going to be doing a review on the brand new and highly anticipated NECA Ultimate Friday the 13th Pamela Voorhees figure. So before we take a look at Pamela, let's go ahead and take a look at all of the accessories that she comes with. So first up, she comes with a set of open hands. Now the pegs on these are really thin, so getting these off, definitely be careful. It makes an awful noise, so you can see how tiny the pegs on her hands are, so definitely be careful when you're switching that out. Up next, she comes with an alternate right hand for holding the arrows. She does come with 4 different arrows. This is the specific arrow that killed Jack, and that looks pretty cool. Up next, she comes with the bow and the hands for holding the bow. You also get 3 of these regular arrows, as I said, and I think it's really awesome that this has a real string on it that you can draw back. She just can't hold it too accurately. I wish she could hold the arrow just a little bit better, like say Ellie from The Last of Us, that figure that NECA did. But I think this looks really good. I love the wash on it, the sculpt to the handle looks great. I think it's pretty cool that NECA included these as accessories. Up next, she comes with her regular right accessory holding hand and the knife here. And this blade feels really brittle because it's really thin. I do have to kind of stretch her fingers out whenever I put it in her hand. So I'll most likely probably just leave it in the sheath right here. So you have to kind of pull her fingers apart and then pull that out. You can see the paint work on the knife there, the paint and sculpt work, and that looks pretty good. And this stays really well in the sheath right here. Like I said, getting it in here is kind of tricky without breaking the blade, so I'll most likely just leave it in the sheath there. Up next, she comes with the broken oar, and this is sculpted and painted really well. NECA did a phenomenal job at painting this. I think all of these details are actually printed on for the wood grain there, and man, that looks really good. You do get sculpted texturing as well, but a lot of this is the paint work, and that's pretty convincing. The paint job on this looks really nice. Up next, she comes with this axe, and it looks pretty good as well. You get some nice blood paint right there, and the texturing to the handle is really good. You also get a subtle black wash to it, so that looks very awesome. For her final weapon, you get a machete, and I love the shimmery silver paint that the blade is done in. That looks really good. For her first head sculpt, you get this sinister smiling head, and I think NECA did a phenomenal job at capturing Betsy Palmer's likeness. That looks really, really good. The paint on the hair for the most part is done really well. You get the sandy blonde color and then the brown underneath. But towards the edges, you get this reddish color hair. And I feel like that's just really noticeable. If it was done like a little more subtle, it would look better, like maybe if they printed it on. And it's like that on all of the head sculpts. So while I don't think that that right there looks the greatest, I think the likeness and the head sculpt itself looks really nice. Up next, you get her really maniacal smiling head sculpt. Again, really, really good likeness. Man, that looks really good. I can't get over how awesome the likeness on all of these head sculpts are. The previous ones, what was the previous one? The previous one was a retro one from I think like 10 years ago. It wasn't bad for the time that it was released in. The only other time we actually got a regular Pamela was in the 2-pack with Part 2 Jason, if I recall, and the likeness on that head sculpt definitely wasn't good. Up next, you get this head sculpt, which I believe is when she's talking in Jason's voice. And man, they did a really good job on that. On this particular head sculpt, though, I do have these brown marks, and it's like down in the plastic, so it's not something that's going to come off. So that is a bit of a bummer. And finally, you get her screaming head sculpt. And I feel like the likeness could have been a little bit better on this. The paint work is also pretty different on her hair. You can see how different the paint is. Like, the paint on this one is darker. The paint's a lot lighter on this one. And the teeth. I think that's my biggest problem with this head sculpt. The teeth aren't sculpted on, they're just printed on. But they kind of run together, especially towards the edge here. So I think that ends up looking really funny. So yeah, this is definitely my least favorite head sculpt out of all of them. So now, let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the figure. So taking a look at the rest of the figure, it's sculpted just as well. I actually feel like this main piece right here for the sweater almost looks like real fabric the way it's sculpted. Just all the textures and the pattern and everything, the wrinkles, that looks pretty convincing. The sculpt on this is amazing, and it gets a very subtle light blue wash. You get a little bit on the wrinkles back here. It's barely noticeable, but you do actually get some paint variation over top of the whole sweater. And that looks really, really nice. Even the sculpt on the arms is pretty convincing, of course till you get down here on the joints. But yeah, that is sculpted very, very well. Of course you can see that they did paint the joints and it's starting to chip right there. But at least the color that the joint is cast in, it looks the same to me. It might be just a little bit of a shade darker. But for the most part, I think they did a good job at matching the pegs up there. I don't think they necessarily would have had to paint that on there. On all of her left hands, the ring is sculpted and painted on there, and I feel like her skin has a bit of a wash to it. You can tell it's a darker shade right there in between her fingers. They also painted the fingernails on. It's a lighter shade of skin tone, and that looks really good. They even sculpted the lines in her palms. You really can't see that because she'll have the accessories in her hands. But she even has some really good sculpt detail there. And even on the back you get the veins there, and I think that's brought out really nicely by that subtle wash they did there. Looking at the pants, I've seen some people saying that it reuses Cheryl's pants from Evil Dead, but they're entirely different, especially the bottoms. You can see the bottom is a lot wider for the boots there. There's a prominent texturing on Pamela's that this has a bit of a texture to it, but not this kind of a texture. The wrinkles are entirely different. So yeah, some people said that Pamela reused legs from her, and that's not true. As far as I can tell, these legs are brand new, and everything on this is all brand new parts. But the wrinkles are sculpted really nicely. I feel like they actually look kind of realistic. And if I hold it up to the light here, you can see that this has some really awesome texturing to it. You can see the textures right there. So yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised with that. I love all the textures you get there. That looks really nice. And then you get her boots, which are also sculpted really well. They're just cast in a matte black color, but still sculpted good nonetheless. And then you don't get anything on the bottoms of her feet there, but you do get peg holes. So now, let's go ahead and go over her articulation. So she has a ball-jointed head and neck that can look up all the way. She can look down just a little bit. She can move her head side to side and all the way around. She has shoulders that can move all the way out. She has single-jointed elbows that can only bend in that far. I definitely wish they would have made this like a deep cut joint. That way her arm could bend in just a little more. She has a swivel wrist that can move side to side and up and down very nicely. I think she has a ball-jointed diaphragm and waist that can move back that far, forward just a little bit. It is pretty hindered because of this sweater piece right here. She can move all the way around there. With the knife taken out of the sheath, she can do a complete split. She does have ball-jointed hips that allow for that. She can kick forward very slightly, back very nicely. Very, very nice thigh swivel. Single-jointed knees that, just like with the elbows, don't quite bend in the way they should. They actually feel pretty brittle. So if you force it anymore, I could definitely see that snapping off. So that is a bit unfortunate. It does move side to side. She has a swivel up here in the shin that can move side to side. Ankle that can move down very slightly, up all the way, and a nice ankle rocker. So the articulation isn't hindered too much by the pants right here. So now, let's do some size comparisons. So first up, since I have her out for this review, here she is next to Cheryl from The Evil Dead. Here she is next to a Ben Cooper figure. I wanted to show this off because I feel like NECA could reuse this body mold for a Kid Jason figure. I could see them doing maybe a Pamela and him 2-pack. I feel like the body mold might be a little bit too large. But yeah, they might be able to use that, or Customizer might be able to customize one of these bodies into a young Jason figure for the Ultimate line. Here she is next to Part 2 Jason. Here she is next to Part 3 Jason. Here she is next to Part 4 Jason. Here she is next to Dream Sequence Jason. Here she is next to Roy Burns. Here she is next to Part 7 Jason. Here she is next to Video Game Jason. And finally, here she is next to her floating video game severed head version of herself. So overall, I would highly recommend picking this up because I think NECA did a fantastic job on this. The fans have wanted a Pamela Voorhees forever, and this doesn't disappoint. I think NECA did a really good job on that. The likeness on all of the head sculpts is stellar. It really looks like Betsy Palmer. The sculpt is also really good. Like I said, I think the sculpt on that sweater is convincing. You get textures all over the whole thing. The only real complaint that I had was the elbows couldn't bend in all the way, and that weird reddish colored hair towards the front of her hair. Like I said, if it would have been painted on a little more subtle, it would have looked better, but it's really concentrated and noticeable. But aside from that, I think NECA did a really good job on this, and I would definitely recommend picking it up. So, that's my review. If you like this review, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.